What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of NewOrleans.Basketball and NewOrleans.Network podcast. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined with my fellow middle brother, Garrick Rattler. What's poppin' with you, bro? Happy 4th of July, happy Essence Fest, all of it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What up, bro? Everything's all good on this side, trying to stay warm and out the way. Cool and out the way. I'm sorry. I can stay warm by walking outside. Try to stay cool and out the way. First off, shout out to all the people in Houston, Texas, and all of that area who's affected by hurricane. The hurricane, I think his name is Beryl, whatever the case is. But it has touched down. So anybody affected by that, please know that we're thinking about you, praying for you, hoping that everything works well for everybody in that area. As people, as residents of New Orleans and from New Orleans, we know all too well about it. So, just sending some well wishes and good thoughts to everybody out there. Also, man, yeah, it's funny because it's like it's the summer, but like I'm really getting my basketball kingdom is being fed. Because there's just so much basketball being taken place. Obviously, the Summer League has kicked off. NBA Summer League has kicked off. The Pelicans haven't, but other teams, the California Classic has kicked off. Bronny made his Summer League debut. Obviously, you have the Team USA and the select team. Trey Murphy is out there doing this thing, and Team USA is practicing against them. They're getting ready for the Olympics. There's the qualifying tournament. Shout out to Jose for dragging Puerto Rico and into the Olympics for the first time in a ton of years. Giannis made it. Luka didn't, man. Serbia is not going to be in the playoffs. I mean, in the Olympics this year. Giannis knocked them off in a really good game where Giannis kind of took over and blew them out the water, which was incredible. And then obviously, man, I know people get in our comments about it and yell at me about it, but I'm going to do it anyway because to hell with you. The W is incredible, man. The W is just, it is such high level basketball, such good basketball being played. I just want to highlight 3 ladies if y'all don't give me a second. A'ja Wilson becoming the Vegas Aces all-time leading scorer. Incredible. Everybody knows I'm a big A'ja Wilson fan. I love her to death. That's my heart. So her becoming the franchise leader in points is incredible. Shout out to Caitlin Clark, who became the first rookie to get a triple W in the WNBA, which is insane. Incredible. Shouts out to her. She and Aaliyah Boston starting to figure some things out. The Fever starting to figure some things out. They got a lot of Nash and Amari Stoudemire between them two, which is incredible. And then obviously Angel Reese, Bayou Barbie, setting the WNBA record for most consecutive double doubles in the game. I mean, she is just absolutely relentless and phenomenal on the board, and she is just dominating out there as a rookie. So shout out to those 3 ladies. They are out there killing it. Please support the W and watch it. It is incredible basketball. And then obviously as well, the big 3 is taking place. And Corey Brewer out there it's a lot of former Pelicans in the big 3. Jordan Crawford out there getting buckets. If you remember Instant Grits, if you know, you know. Yeah, if you know, you know. Corey Brewer out there getting buckets. His team is undefeated. Just a lot of good basketball everywhere you look. And I'm enjoying it and excited. It feels like Nirvana right now as we wait for the next steps to go down with free agency and the Pelicans as well. So how's everything on your side, bro?
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. If you are a basketball connoisseur, this is that time for you, right? Obviously, with this year and the new changes with free agency, you didn't see deals popping on. With the new changes in the CBA, you don't see as much action happening in terms of transactions and things like that. So the fact that basketball is just in a good place across the board, NBA, international, WNBA, like the game has really progressed so much that you can watch good basketball content pretty much everywhere. Again, like it shows you the direction that it's headed in terms of being a national or excuse me, international sport and climbing up there with soccer from that standpoint. But before we get too into the things that haven't happened this offseason with the Pelicans and everybody else, make sure you guys follow us on X, on Twitter, on IG. That's NewOrleans.Basketball, no E. Make sure you're liking the episode below. And make sure, if not, I don't know why not, that you get subscribed to the channel and follow us here as we track these live updates. So before we get to the Brandon Ingram or the not Brandon Ingram or the center that doesn't exist, something else happened since the last time we talked. We talked about the Pelicans acquiring DeJounte Murray, and he seems like he was built to be a New Orleans player. Like, he has embraced it. He has jumped into it. He is excited for whatever role is in front of him. He landed in the city. He's got the Pelicans gear on. But first things first, you had to figure out what number he was going to wear, because Herb Jones, in a state that has a National Herb Jones Day, was already wearing his beloved number 5. Well, come to find out, there had just been an agreement made of some kind where Herb Jones has gifted number 5 because that's the number DeJounte has always worn, and Herb has worn a gang of numbers throughout his basketball career. What are your thoughts on that? That's pretty cool for someone who's so beloved by the franchise already. So, you know what? We're going to accept you with open arms.
Yeah, that's very on brand for her, man. I mean, just a professional, a guy who is all about hoops for him, right? And so I'm sure 5 holds a big, big value to him as the number he started his career with, the number he's kind of made a name for. But to do that for DeJounte, just to kind of get this whole thing off on a good note. I'm sure there was no negative notes. And it's funny between those two guys, obviously with the history that they have, like we talk about in that play-in, the inaugural play-in game. But I think 2 is nice on Herb. 2 it gives a real shutdown cornerbacky vibe, and he looks a lot like Patrick Surtain, his fellow Alabama stud corner out there. So just to have that number 2 out there, kind of looking like a shutdown corner, and obviously it's like an inverse of 5, like it looks like 5 turned upside down. So it's pretty cool, but it's good to see those 2 guys kind of getting locked in, because they're as far as you look, and whether Brandon Ingram is not, like, that might be your Pelicans starting backcourt right there with DeJounte and Herb Jones. So good to see those guys kind of getting some chemistry, getting some things down. I'm sure there was either some financial info, or well, it's Herb, so it might be like, I'll just take you out to fishing one day, or like I'll like buy you a Pelicans issued hoodie. I'll give you my Pelicans issued hoodie type thing. So good for them to kind of have that kind of cohesion going and start this thing off right.
Right. So you go from that, and you mentioned Jose and what he was able to do, bringing Puerto Rico back to the Olympics for the first time in 20 years. You saw the emotion he was sharing with Carlos Arroyo, JJ Barea, and the players that came before them. And we tweeted out Jose was the only one. Like last year, this time we were looking at FIBA, Dyson was in there, and JB was in there, and Trey was on the select team. This year, it was Jose or bust. Until today, where the Pelicans came to an agreement with Daniel Theis on a 1-year veteran minimum deal. Hey, the Pelicans got a center. Again, I tweeted out when JV walked away and when Cody Zeller was a part of the trade. We've been talking about it on this podcast. The Pelicans needed 3 new centers. I tweeted out, hey, they're going to go into the season with 3 new centers. But at the time, the only center on the roster was Yves Missi. Well, now you have number 2. What do you think about the transaction? We talked about Daniel Theis and what he may be able to bring, but what do you think about bringing him in as a part of the Pelicans fold?
Yeah, I like the move. I think he's a veteran. He's a very competitive guy, and again, he's shorter, right? Like he's 6'8", 6'9", but he's different than like how you would view Larry Nance. Like he's more physical. He's more of a physical presence at the rim. He's a really good shot blocker. And as you mentioned, like he's like the starting, like the anchor as Franz and Mo Wagner kind of grow into their role for the German national team. Like he and Dennis Schroeder, Daniel Theis and Dennis Schroeder are kind of those like bedrocks for that team. And he's really like proud of his German heritage and things like that. And he's a guy that's going to compete and things. So if you think of him as sort of like a Larry Nance replacement, a guy who could come in and be that athletic big, and be a guy that can contribute in those ways until Yves Missi kind of gets ready and he's ready to step into that role. He's not the starting center. This is not the center to start, the game, but he is a good and you need him in a pinch to start. He can start in a pinch and give you good minutes. As that you saw it with the Clippers. He was with the Celtics for a while. Like he can do some things. And honestly, if you leave him open and he got enough space, like he'll shoot it. He's not a prolific shooter, but he's a guy that will take the shot, and he'll make it if you leave him open enough. So I like the pickup on a veterans minimum. I think this is a better guy to have as a veterans minimum than Cody Zeller. So I appreciate that part, but I think he's a good fit to come in and be, kind of falling into that mode of what the Pelicans have showed us, that they're looking for that young or athletic, big rim runner, rim protecting big men. They drafted one. Now they bring in their veteran version of it as they look to fill in for that starter.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. The way you look at a player like Daniel Theis is different from a Cody Zeller, where it was like, damn, they got to throw Cody Zeller out there with their season on the line, versus Daniel Theis has been playing meaningful minutes these past couple years, and you can see there's still a little pop in his step. There's still a little bit that he can contribute, as you saw in FIBA last year. The way I look at it is exactly what you said. Think of this as like the Dwight Powell. Last year when the Mavericks, they drafted Derek Lively, he was a raw prospect. They didn't plan to start him. They got to training camp and were like, oh, this guy needs to play. Well, he didn't just play like that right away. Like Dwight Powell kind of had to be etched out of the rotation. Then they make a trade for Daniel Gafford, and Dwight Powell were sent off to no man's land. I think you want to see something similar like this with the Pelicans. Whenever they make their move for the starting center, which you'll get into, you want to see Yves Missi try to fight off Daniel Theis to say, you know what, I'm going to be the second bid off the bench. And you use part of the season to get to that point. And for that, I think that's a good move by the Pelicans, bringing him in as your third center. If he's the replacement for Cody Zeller, check. You got more athletic at the three. If Yves Missi is the replacement for Larry Nance, check. You got more athletic and taller at the number two. So again, what happens with the starting center, that'll be the thing where people judge the Pelicans offseason the most. So the first thing we got to talk about, Griff came out after the season and said there was going to be changes for this team. Well, if you've paid attention to this team the last couple of years, there have been a little bit of continuity talks. There have been, hey, we're going to get rough around the edges, but no moves have been made. So far this offseason alone, which is crazy to think about if you look back at the last couple off seasons, Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance, E.J. Liddell, gone. Traded for DeJounte Murray. Jonas Valanciunas, gone. Walked out the door. It's going to be somewhat of a mentor and get a lot of minutes and probably like a lot of buckets for the Wizards. Najee Marshall goes down the street to where I'm at in Dallas and walks into, I think he's going to play a big role for that. I think he's going to be the Deshaun Stevenson junkyard dog that they've been looking for, that they had on their last championship title. Those are a lot of rotation players. So the complacency is gone from that standpoint, but there's still a lot of moves to be made. And what I want to take a look at and get your idea is, again, I think that there's been this like notion on David Griffin that like, hey, he's a lot of talk, or hey, there's a lot of gamesmanship or salesmanship and things like that put into the thing that makes up David Griffin. And some of that is true and some of that is warranted. But like if you really take a look at his trade history with the Pelicans, he hasn't lost too many times. Like outside of the, we're shedding salary with the Devontae Graham fiasco and things like that. Let's look at the first trade that he made, walked into the door, was like, oh yeah, AD, your best player wants to leave. Well, you get BI, you get Lonzo, you get Josh Hart, you get a gang of picks back. Off that situation, knowing that like there was a lot of tampering happening and AD obviously was, I feel like that was a win, as big of a win as you were going to get. You got young players who, again, have led to other things. And now, again, what happens with BI will probably determine a lot of what you think if this is a win or not. But on paper, I think that's a win. You look at the Drew Holiday trade, that's a win for both sides. The Bucks paid for a championship. They got Drew Holiday, overpaid for a role player, but it worked out because they got a championship. Lonzo Ball is the one that everybody likes to revert back to and say, look, David Griffin, you lost that trade. Well, guess what? The Bulls got tapped for tampering on that one too. So it wasn't in a situation for you to win. And then the Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe trade, you got Trey Murphy out of that trade, and you got Jonas Valanciunas. That's a win. The Devontae Graham, complete dumpster fire. Both acquiring him and sending him out for picks. And then the CJ McCollum trade, I know CJ is not in everyone's best light right now, but still a very productive player. And again, if you looked at it and you say you overpaid for CJ, but the reason you overpaid was what he was going to mean for your young players and Zion Williamson and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones and teach this locker room how to be professional or also contribute like what? It's a win, right? Like, yes, Josh Hart and Nikhil are playoff rotational players, but again, they're not changing the outlook of your franchise by any means, one way or the other. So I think that's a win. And then again, the DeJounte Murray trade that just happened, which on surface looks like a win. So, like, if you look at that history, this isn't a GM who is just giving stuff away or just throwing trades away and throwing assets away. He's, again, incremental success, sustainable success, all of those things, and he's kind of lived by that. What are your thoughts so far on the dialogue, one way or the other, on how David Griffin deals with transactions, and do you think it's fair or not?
Yeah, I think, David Griffin's tenure with the Pelicans, depending on, what your feelings are towards certain players and certain moves, can be viewed both ways. I think he gets held to a standard that, is people like to compare like the moves that OKC does or and things like that. And a lot of things that people criticize Griff about, again, like you say, are warranted, and the flowery talk and the salesmanship and the car salesmanship, like all of that there is truth behind all of that. However, when you look at like what the situation that he got into and you compare it to somebody like OKC, Sam Presti got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and was able to kind of move in certain ways and sit on picks and let things develop because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not Zion Williamson, right? And so the timing on both of those acquisition of both of those players has been marked dramatically differently. And because the pressure to win with Zion is so much different than it is to win with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, even though right now in a vacuum, like Shai is a better player. If you look at like the MVP,
all NBA,
like all NBA MVP caliber guy, like those things, but he's had opportunities to grow with that team, to get to be sat of garbage and get a Chet Holmgren in the draft and get Jalen Williams in the draft. Like he's able to do those things and find Aaron Wiggins and as years Isaiah Joe in those trades. Whereas like Griff, if Griff was to make some of those trades where he's like, you know what, we're going to take the patient approach and not, trade for this person and trade for that person or not do this, not do that, he would be viewed in like you're being lazy, you're just sitting around and not doing anything. And so that's the pressure that comes with having a guy like Zion on your team, who is not only a generational talent as far as, how the NBA viewed him coming into the game, but he's a box office talent. Everybody is talking about Zion. Everybody's focused on Zion. And so the things that Griff has had to deal with and to move and things like you said, I think he's done a great job as far as trading and being smart with his trades and striking when the iron is hot. Now where Griffin, what Griff does kind of hurt himself a little bit is the contracts that he gives out and some of the extensions that he gives out and things like that. And the timing on those extensions, not even seeing if JV can, obviously it worked out well, but you hadn't even seen JV play a bounce on the floor, giving him an extension, right? Giving CJ McCollum an extension that right now looks, it looks a little tough right now with the second apron and everything on hand. But obviously some of the times he has won that Josh Hart trade, that Josh Hart contract was one that worked. Like it worked well. It was very unique and it allowed CJ McCollum to come in on a trade. It allowed Josh Hart to then double back and get paid at another time. Like it worked for everyone. And so there's push and pull any which way it goes. And so he's been landing on his lap and his doorstep a very difficult, situation where Brandon Ingram, who is beloved by the city and the team and the organization, with the way the salary cap is in these new CBA situations, it's looking more prudent to not have just given him that max contract off the dot. As hard of a negotiation and as tough as it is to sit and watch this kind of play out in public, it's a smart move. It's a smart business move to allow this to play out and allow Brandon Ingram to see what's going on, and see what the market is telling him his value is before getting back and saying, listen, this is what we're dealing with. And so listen, he's been much maligned. And again, some of the things that he's done, he shot himself in the foot and he's talked himself into a lot of things that have been wrong. And it's like, hey, we have to address rim protection, and then the entire season don't address rim protection. Things like that. But all in all, he hasn't been the worst GM that you could possibly have. And now the team is flushed with a lot of talent that you would never think would be able, you'd see in New Orleans. How many times before David Griffin got to New Orleans, we were seeing Alonzo G at small forward or Julian Wright, how many forwards have Quincy Pondexter have walked in and out of those doors? And now you have guys like Trey Murphy and Herb Jones and DeJounte Murray on the team, and Zion and Brandon Ingram. And so there's things that he has missed, but there are a lot of things that he has done well. And right now he's in a position where he's managing his assets and also trying to walk a tight line with this Brandon Ingram situation, because regardless of what happens, this is a situation that has to be massaged every single day, as far as gauging the trade markets, while also letting Brandon Ingram know, hey, we're not trying to disrespect you in the event that you need to re-sign him because you don't want to sour those relationships.
Yeah, it's a very sensitive situation knowing Brandon Ingram's relationship with this organization. And, he was the first one saying in his postseason presser about, I won my first All-Star here. I got to be myself here. Obviously, the relationships he built with Jose and Najee and Willie and things like that, you could tell it's an internal battle for a 26-year-old who is, entering the prime of his career to say, yo, I need you to take a pay cut when you should be on the up and up. It's just a tough situation to be in for all sides involved. But let's do this. Let's play the hypothetical. Let's say something happens where BI, and we'll talk about the figure and things like that. BI comes to an agreement. You still are missing a starting center, and you're still capped at the first apron. So you still have to go find one. And so based off, again, Griff's trade history, it's almost like when you play fantasy football or you fantasy basketball or any sport at all. You always tend to go to the same teams or the bad teams and make trades and take their good players while you're fleecing them on the other side. David Griffin he's very smart with the organizations that he's trading with. I'm not that shocked that David Griffin and Danny Ainge probably do not get along on the phone when they're trying to make negotiations, because David Griffin's the same guy was like, yo, I cannot trade Billy Hernangomez and then let him walk out the door the very next season. It's one of those shrewd negotiators. But let's look at the market and look realistically at players that you could obtain without going over, or you can't go over the apron without going into the luxury tax. Because if you look at, again, the production that you got from JV, just the availability alone, it's going to be damn near impossible to replace that. It's just not going to be the stats were where they were, 12 and 10, not his best numbers. That's probably replaceable. But in terms of the consistency and the professionalism and the lack of injury, probably not. So let's look around the league. So a common name you've seen from Charlotte, Mark Williams, owed $5 million this year, $6 million team out next year. A lot of injury history. He played 62 games. The last two games about 12 and 10, but a productive young player. Is that someone you could see Griff saying, here's a first, here's a second if you got to splurge, whatever it may be. Is that someone you could see the Pelicans potentially approaching and trying to look for?
Yeah, Mark Williams is an interesting prospect. I liked him coming out of college. I think just the vertical ability, the athleticism, the injury history is what it is. I think when you're looking at the Pelicans and what they have to offer and what they can spend, I think you're gonna find a flawed player. It's not gonna be the perfect player. The perfect player is not gonna exist on that. And so would he be a guy that you could come in and take and see? The problem is, and I don't know, again, I would have to check on this, is that I think if you're hard capped, like you can't take back more money than you send out. Is that right? Like, is it?
I believe if you're under first aid, everybody's trying to figure that out. But they also
it's
have
a lot going on.
Right?
Okay, yeah, okay. Because there's a lot going on with the CBA, and I be trying to parse through and read everything. And so listen, if Mark Williams is a guy that is available, you would really be playing center by committee at that point, because you can't rely on him to be available every single game. And so now you're dipping into is how fast is Yves Misi going to be ready? Is Daniel Theis, can he play more minutes and give you the same effectiveness that he can give you in short spurts? But I like Mark Williams. He's tall, he's rangy, he's athletic. He's a guy that could get on the boards. I think he had like a 20 rebound game. I remember watching him. He had like a crazy rebounding game. And I think with the passing ability of a guy like DeJounte Murray, I think that'll pair nicely with him in that dunker spot and whatever. So he's good. I think that's something that you could take a look at as a cheap option to go. I think there's some other people that you could look at as well before him, but Mark Williams is not I'm not completely out on Mark Williams.
Right. Like, and again, you are bargain shopping right now. And again, if you got a starting lineup that composed of some combination of DeJounte Murray, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, B.I., CJ in this scenario, you probably don't need a center who is going to demand the ball or going to need the ball in order to be their best on the court. You probably need someone who is low maintenance, who doesn't want the ball and things like that.
It's especially when the closing lineup is probably a lot of times not going to have a center at all. If the matchup calls for it, you'll probably have one of those athletic big men out there. But most of the time, you're probably going to close with Zion at the 5 or with Trey even at the 5 as a tall guy who can kind of space the floor as you go down. So it'll be interesting to see who the best lineups are, even when you get this potential center. If BI stays, then that ending 5 will probably most likely not have a center in it.
Right, agreed. So then, if it's not him, I look at a guy like his teammate, Nick Richards, averaged 10 and 8, a block per game, 120 dunks last year. That's more than anybody on the Pelicans. He started 51 games last year. Like, he's cheap. Again, you're not looking for 20 and 10 out of this player. You're looking for a guy who can stand next to the rim and that can block a shot when it comes near him. Like, that's basically what you're looking for at this point. And again, those are very similar numbers to JV. Here's my thing. We know the last one. Apparently, he's playing right now in Summer League. I don't know why. We talked about Walker Kessler last week, and again, there's been a lot of stir about momentum about people trying to reach out, see if they can acquire him. My question to you is, would you overpay for Walker Kessler? Like, again, Danny Ainge and David, I would love to be a fly on the wall during their text conversation, phone conversation, and just see what type of conversations that they have. But if he was like, yo, I need 3 firsts for Walker Kessler, because that seems like a Danny Ainge thing to do. Like, would you splurge like that? Because at that point, this is your team of 20-somethings, and this is the team you're going to grow with.
I don't know if I'd go up to 3, but I would entertain Danny's conversations on Walker Kessler. Only because, number one, I think he fits exactly what the Pelicans need as far as rim protection, as far as rim running ability. I think he's the motor is there. And what's weird about him is that you don't really know what his availability is, because the Jazz for like the last couple of years have like shut down players like in the middle of the season, like just like they're not playing anymore. We've won too many games at the beginning of the season, so we need to start tanking.
Sort of like OKC with Shea, but yeah,
exactly. So yeah, you don't really know if he like really has been hurt or like has he just been shut down, but he hasn't really played a lot. And so what I mean by that is what he has shown you on what he has put on tape is the ability to rim protect, the ability to rim run and do those things. but he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him, and he's young. He can kind of grow with this team, and he has, really, really great contract. And I think that he's a guy that's not going to, even if he reaches like his high on the Pelicans, it won't be a situation where he reaches a point where he outprices himself because of the things that he does. I don't think this is Rudy Gobert getting $40 million a year type of player. I think this is a guy who knows his role and can do those things well. And then you'd have him for 2 years anyway. And so I think, he's a guy that I would really, really be calling the Jazz and seeing what's Danny's opening line. I already know it's probably Zion and 3 first. So after you move past that, what's the next statement? What's the next kind of deal you could get to with that guy? Even if it doesn't involve Laurie, I still think that you could make a move for Walker Kessler. And if it costs a pick, that if this team hits the way it's supposed to hit and it's a late first rounder, then I think you go for it, especially when you have guys that are already on the team that can't find minutes as it is.
Right. So you look at that and you say, and again, I think it's a very realistic option that BI is on this team to enter next season. Again, that could change in 3 seconds with any Woj bomb or anything like that. But I just think that's where it's at. But before we dive into the issue with the Brandon Ingram trade, you talked about it a little bit. Like the extension history for Griffin at this franchise has been a little all over the place, right? Like, so the first one was BI, Auto Max, coming off a best season. It was great. Lonzo, who again was coming off a good season, and people saw the chemistry with Zion, was like, are they really willing to let him walk? They had a price for his role, and they let him walk. Josh Hart had a price for his role, and they let him walk. The only one that really stood out is the CJ McCollum trade, which is the trade that is biting the Pelicans in the ass right now. Like, or the extension that is killing him right now. Like, at the time, pundits around the league were like, why? Why, with the new CBA coming up, why do all those things? Again, we've talked about it at length about overpaying for leadership, but that's what the Pelicans did. Because then if you look after that, Zion, he signed a max extension, but there was a lot of outs. That was team friendly. That was, the Pelicans are put in a situation where if this goes south, they can either trade it or they can cancel the contract. You look at Herb Jones, who was just a first-team all-defensive player. Great contract. One of the best contracts in the NBA. Right?
Contract.
Now you got Trey Murphy. That's TBD in terms of what that looks like. But, like, if you look at the trend, people have been kind of being flexible with what the Pelicans are doing. And if not, they're out of here. So
I mean, Zion signed a contract with no player option. I mean,
none. Right. And so you look at what the history is telling you and how they have gone about conducting business, and then it brings up the BI dilemma. Look, we just talked about the trade history that the Pelicans have about. We just talked about how high of a value that this team looks at Brandon Ingram. They are not about to give Brandon Ingram out while his value is at the lowest for scraps. Like, they're just not going to do that. Like, he averaged over 20 points in every season that he's played for the Pelicans. They're not about to be like, oh yeah, Harrison Barnes, a couple seconds. Like, that's not what they're jumping at. And so you look at that and you say, okay, Brandon Ingram, just like we've been saying for weeks on this podcast, we value you, and we know how much you mean in this franchise, and we know how much the franchise means to you. But we cannot pay you $50 million. And just to say that, hey, we're not doing wrong by you, we're not, doing this, that, and the other, we're going to let you go say. And that's why I think a lot of this has been like trying to set themselves up to look like the good fight. Look, BI, we went to every team and we said, this is what we hold VI's value at. Are you willing to give them the max? They all said no. So if you're not going to get a max from us and you're not going to get a max from them, the max is not on the table, right? So would you rather be in a situation that is conducive to yourself and, quite frankly, values you higher than anyone else in the league right now? Or would you rather go sign a similar contract somewhere else? And so my question to you is like, okay, well, if I understand, He's 26, entering the prime of his career. But if you're going to take less money, is B.I. about to go sign for $40 million to go live in Utah? Like, is he about to go sign to go play with the Nets who are going nowhere? Like, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think that this is one of those things where teams are posturing and over the next couple of weeks they're saying, you know what, never mind, we're going to give B.I. the max? Or do you think that there are some real conversations that need to be had between him and his agents that say your value is what someone's willing to pay you?
Man, the Brandon Ingram situation has been a loaded situation. And I think right now it's crazy because both parties have leverage, and then like they also don't have leverage. It's really crazy, the situation, because Brandon Ingram is scouring the market, right? And he's watching Franz Wagner get a max contract, and no questions asked. He's watching OG Anunoby get what he got, right? And all of these guys getting these different, these astronomical contracts and paychecks, and he is betting on himself and standing on business about it, which is perfectly fine. However, the issue, as you should, like I support that always. So that's Brandon was doing that at that point. The Pelicans are saying, okay, we're watching all of these wing teams that were interested in you fill up spots, right? We've watched the Kings go get DeMar DeRozan, and now they rumored to get Kyle Kuzma. We've watched Philadelphia sign Paul George, so they're gone. Will Guillory, friend of the show, put out a report today about the Hawks, whether you believe it or not, but saying basically that they didn't want Brandon Ingram. They didn't want to be on the hook for his next contract and what he's asking for. So you're watching these teams and you're saying, Brandon, we're it's there. And so you think of a team like Cleveland who needs a wing, but I think, obviously there's still time. You can trade up until whenever. But I think that if there was a deal that the Cavaliers were really interested in, there would be a trade happening there. I think that would be something that would have happened already. And so you're looking at all of these teams who don't want to be on the hook for Brandon Ingram's next contract that he's desiring, and you're saying we tried, right? Like we gave you the runway, and there's no team to do that. And so now it flips over back to Brandon Ingram, because Brandon Ingram is in a sense where he doesn't have to extend. Like he doesn't have to. He has another year on the books. And so now you get into a situation where Brandon Ingram says, okay, well, that's fine. That's cool. I'm not going to re-sign anything. And I'm just going to play this year out and see what I can get next year on free agency. I bet on myself year. And so at that point, the Pelicans are like, well, that's fine, but they kind of have to not let him walk out the door for nothing, right? And as time goes on, more teams are going to say, well, look, I'm not going to give you assets for Brandon Ingram, or I'm going to lowball you because I'll just wait till he gets to free agency, and then I'll just sign him without having to give up any assets. And so you run into all of these different, and that's why it's such a delicate and kind of like it's really, really complex situation. And so what I think is that Brandon Ingram, I think he does enjoy being in New Orleans and being with the Pelicans. And I do think that if he's going to take a haircut, I think it would be in New Orleans. The problem is that I don't know how much of a haircut the Pelicans want to give Brandon Ingram, and if he wants to accept that in a situation where, yes, they value him, is very conducive to him as a person and his psyche. But let's be honest, if he's trying to hit the market, you kind of want as much usage as you can get. And on a team with DeJounte and CJ and Trey Murphy, who's going to be getting a lot of usage because you're paying him whatever his next contract is going to be. And like Zion, obviously, like would he be able to get would he be able to up his value from where it is now without the usage that he would get? He would have to change his shot diet and his shot profile and shoot more threes. He would have to do that. But I do think that this could work in favor of the Pelicans, because if you get a pissed off Brandon Ingram who's like, to hell with it, that's fine. Let's everybody, nobody wants to pay me, nobody wants me. I'm about to have the best season of my life. I think that obviously helps the Pelicans. It would give this a lot easier, make this a lot easier to do. But I do think there is a number, right? There is a number that Brandon Ingram would feel confident and comfortable in, and the Pelicans also will feel comfortable in, because my ideal situation would be to get him to get in a 2-year or 3-year, whatever, less than max, and hit the market later, because I think next year CJ's expiring contract at $33 million will be a lot more valuable as an expiring contract in this new version of the CBA than it is right now. I think that 2 years left at $30 and $33 million is just a lot right now for teams to like stomach. But if he's a $33 million expiring contract, I think next year he would be a candidate to be moved, and there would be a lot of people, either bad teams looking to get off of that with an extension. I mean, with an expiring contract, or find another player that you could trade a $30 million contract for if you're really ready to go into the second apron, or whatever the case is. So I think that there is a number that Brandon Ingram get to. I see people talking about $40-45 million as he wants over 50. I think anywhere between 40 to 45 would be good for Brandon Ingram. I just don't know if where his mentality is at as far as accepting that haircut this year, because he doesn't have to. He could go into free agency. But I do think that there is a number that the Pelicans will be comfortable giving to him. And we just have to see if Brandon Ingram is willing to accept that right now, and then maybe hit the market at a later date.
Here's my counter to all of that. Where is the situation that BI is being traded to that increases his value? Because if I look around the league, there's not a lot of teams where he's going to become the one option and get a bunch of shots up. And if you do, you're going to a bad team that's probably not going to win a lot of games. So then what's the knock on Brandon Ingram right now? Empty stats players. Well, if you score a bunch of points on a team that doesn't win anything, you're not knocking that label anymore. So if most teams don't view you as a one option, where are you going to increase your value? Whereas
my question to that would be, well, if winning is the most important thing, then none of this money situation would be a problem, because no winning teams there was never going to be a max contract from any winning team. Right. Like even Philly wasn't trying to give him a max contract. And so that already. The only for instance, I see somebody talking about DeAndre Ayton. Let's say you trade Brandon Ingram for DeAndre Ayton. He could go there and they would pay him a lot of money, and he would just kind of like be in basketball limbo for whatever. But they could give him a lot of money because they're not paying anybody else other than Jeremy Grant.
I'm about to say,
and so that's what I'm saying. Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. And so he would be the only person they paying until they pay Scoot and Shaden Sharp. So what I'm saying is that if he wanted the money, if he wants to win, then like this conversation is all right. Well, yeah, I'm with the Pelicans. They have a decent chance to win going into the season. Sign this contract up, get this contract over for $40-45 million, and I'm in it to win. But like I think a $40 million contract has been there for Brandon Ingram if he wanted to accept it. It seems as though he wants the bag. And I'm looking around trying to figure out, if you want to win and want the bag, there is not a lot of options available for you. And I don't know how many of them will be there for you next season. And so it's just interesting. It's very interesting because whatever Brandon Ingram considers most important, and this is why it's so freaking, cloudy, because Brandon Ingram doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't talk at all. And so you don't know what he wants, right? And like Paul George is on podcast telling you, okay, look, this is what they offered. I said no, this is what I wanted. I wanted the bag. He's out there telling you exactly what happened. Brandon Ingram's the complete opposite. And so you don't really know what his main focus is. But to your point, there's not a lot of places you can go to increase your value other than if you like more than if you stayed with the Pelicans and this team got to a second round, a third round, or whatever the case is, and you were a focal point of that, and then hit the season after that. But
and then the Pelicans have to pay you at that point,
right? And that's what I'm saying. At that point, either the Pelicans have to pay you because you don't want him to leave for nothing. With as many the assets as I think you could get for Brandon Ingram. And again, this new CBA is like doing this because we just watched the Golden State Warriors say, I don't want Kuminga. We don't want Chris Paul because we're going to be at a second tax apron team. If we get those guys anyway, we just won't have Clay. So instead of trading for that, we're just going to like let Clay walk basically because we don't want to take anything. Same thing happened with Paul George. The Clippers were looking at Paul George like we could trade him for Kuminga and Moody and those guys and be a better team, but it's going to make us a second tax apron team where we can't do anything, we can't move, and we won't have Paul George. So instead of taking those guys in and being on the hook for those contract extensions, we're going to value flexibility and just let Paul George walk. So this second tax apron might have some of those ramifications, and those things might come up with Brandon Ingram. But I just don't think you can let Brandon Ingram go into the season without a contract extension because if he walks for nothing, it doesn't with DeJounte Murray there, it doesn't like destroy the team, but like you don't want assets walking out the door and not getting anything back at all with contracts and cap space being so sacred right now. You just don't want him to walk and you're not getting anything for him.
Right. So let's look at a potential landing spot that makes sense financially, right? Like, again, I think I've gotten so many texts from family and friends and asking me, like, what's going to happen with Brandon Ingram? I'm like, to me, this is a numbers thing. There's only so many teams that could afford a max contract. So you bring up Portland. That makes no sense to me. Why would they pay Brandon Ingram 50, 45, whatever?
Why would they pay Jeremy Grant?
Right, it doesn't make sense from that standpoint. And even then, like, I don't think the Pelicans want to take back $35 million because then you're in the same spot with a worse player. And I don't think DeAndre Ayton is someone you should not agree with you more. Hitching your wagon to, so to speak. So then Cleveland, we bring up that option. Well, they just gave Donovan Mitchell a max contract. They're about to give Evan Mobley a max contract. So you're telling me they're about to give Brandon Ingram one too? I don't know if they're that. And again, we talk about what he needs to be successful. Well, he's not going to have the ball there either because they want to give the ball to Donovan Mitchell and they want to give the ball to Evan Mobley. So, like, I don't think that they see a fit. Houston, I don't think Alperen Sengun is are you going to give him a rookie max? I don't think that's what you're going for, especially a team that's trying to
and the Rockets not even – the Rockets don't even want to give him a rookie max, and he was cooking for them.
Yeah, and then when he sat down, they got better because they got better defensively. Nikola Vucevic, no thank you, hard pass. I'm good on all of that.
I'm good.
Maybe Isaiah Stewart. There's reports Trajan wants to take back contracts. I feel like if Trajan wanted BI for $50 million, the trade would have happened already. If anyone knows, it would be Trajan, right? And so I don't see that happening. I know Brook Lopez rumored with the Bucks. Again, they already got Dame. They already got Giannis. They already got Middleton. Are they paying Brandon Ingram $40 million? No. Orlando, Wendell Carter, the other name that you see, again, they just paid Franz. They are about to pay Paolo. They're about to pay Suggs. Are they giving Brandon? So, like, if you look at all these teams, it makes sense while the other side's like, you know what? We don't have that money for Brandon Ingram either. We like the player, but we don't have that either. And so, like, where do you think all this lands as we wrap this up, right? We're talking about this and we're looking at realistic options. The Pelicans have to do something. The entire league is waiting for the Lauri Markkanen news to either die down because they extend him in August or some trade to happen. And then after that, it's Brandon Ingram and what that domino happens and things like that. But let's predict the future. Do you think the Pelicans in the next days, weeks, month, whatever it is, Olympics, find a trade partner who's willing to give Brandon Ingram one, the money that he wants, but then also willing to give the Pelicans the value that they want. Do you think Brandon Ingram and the Pelicans need each other to the point where BI, you have to revamp your reputation around the league so that, again, to your point, maybe you shine something shorter and gives you an opportunity to rebuild that value and get paid sooner rather than later? Or do you think it's three? You walk into the season and everybody takes a risk. You talk about the Pelicans take a risk. Brandon Ingram has not been healthy for like 70 games ever. So he's taking a big risk going into the final years of his contract. It's a risk for everybody. Where do you think it lands if you had to make a guess?
If you held a Nerf gun to my head and told me I had to make a prediction. I hate predictions, but to make a prediction, I think that the Pelicans and Brandon Ingram come to some sort of mutual agreement that pays him upwards of $40 million, but allows him to get back into free agency at a later date when the cap has gone up, when he has, hopefully at that point, kind of got his reputation back. And I think that it works out the best for both teams, for both players. And I think that the Pelicans start, as they get Brandon Ingram back on board, I think they start to look at other ways to either shave salary or to trade players away. And I think, like I said, I think CJ McCollum becomes a high commodity as the season goes on and going into, either the trade deadline where he becomes an expiring contract. You get him for the playoff run this year and then the expiring run next year for a team. Or he, like I said, at the end of if BI, signs on, CJ is now the hot topic to be traded from the Pelicans next season. And so I do think, like, again, if you ask me to put up a prediction, I think that they do come to a mutual extension where BI is happy and he could get back into the free agency market a little later. I just don't see the team that I think to watch would be Cleveland, because they're the only team. They're literally the only team available. Sacramento is gone. I see people talk about the Spurs. The Spurs just got Harrison Barnes. They just got Chris Paul. Like, obviously, they're not spending a lot of money on those two guys, but I also don't think that they're trying to win too hard. And so I think Brandon Ingram kind of defeats that purpose. They went to Vic and said, listen, we got Chris Paul, we got Harrison Barnes. These guys are going to be better. They're going to help you. But I also don't think that they're going to be any good next season. And so they get to pretend like they got better while also kind of not going for Trae Young or Brandon Ingram. Yeah. So I don't think that San Antonio is a place that is looking for Brandon Ingram. And so again, Cleveland is the only one that is missing a wing piece. Their center, the Pelicans have been attached to Jared Allen. Their center rotation, Evan Mobley is the guy that needs to be playing center. We saw it against Boston, how well he looked without Jared Allen. I think that they are the only team, because all the other teams all of the other spaces, talking about the teams that will be getting him this season in this trade window. I think all of those teams are out of the win out now. And I think Cleveland is the only team that he makes sense for, because they've been looking for a small forward for like 4 years. They just re-upped on Donovan Mitchell. And so, like, they are locked in until we're going to compete with this team. I think Brandon Ingram can fit into there, and they'll do whatever it is they need to do with him and give the Pelicans Jared Allen. But in my heart of hearts, I do believe that the Pelicans come to an extension with Brandon Ingram and he stays in New Orleans.
I agree as well. I think that there's too much tied to this locker room. Like, even Trey just went on a podcast piece to talk about everything special. Willie Green saying this is the best duo in the league. Like, there's just too much. This entire time, it's been the Pelicans are trying to trade Brandon Ingram, but they're open to a contract. Like, literally every sentence says that. I just think, again, they need each other in this situation. BI needs to reform his game, and why not do it in a situation that knows you the best and that you trust to get you better? That's where I'm at with it. And I just don't see another team. I don't see a team that is willing to give him the money. And so if I add those things up together, I think that they come to some ground. And so they end up trying to find a center that's good enough versus a top 10 center in the league. I think that's where the Pelicans land in the next couple of days or weeks. But with that being said, the Pelicans Summer League starts this weekend. Summer League is kicked off for everybody else. I don't love how it's spread out between California. There's just too much. Just play them
It's a
all
lot going on.
consistently. Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, it's
going
a lot
on.
going on. It's a lot
Then
going
again,
on.
you probably don't want all them young cats in Vegas for that long. But with that being said, we will preview that and look at those matchups. You'll finally get to see Jordan Hawkins again. He played for the Pelicans. In the next couple weeks, what you got left for the Pelicans? Or what you got left for the people, Garrick?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile a day. Yes, I can't wait for Summer League to start. I love Summer League because a lot of people have a lot of irrational confidence, and I think that the Pelicans got a couple of people on their team, in Antonio and Jordan Hawkins, that's going to be like, I think I'm going to shoot it. I think I'm going to shoot it. And I'm here for those guys. But as always, like you said, we're going to be covering Summer League, previewing Summer League as it comes, and we'll be here to cover it all. And if anything does break, we'll be here with that emergency pod to break it all down. So as always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NewOrleans.Basketball, no E. That's on all your social medias, Twitter, Instagram. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys next time.